colder weather. And, my feet stay dry. They don't get overly hot in them as long as I'm wearing the right socks with them. Everything's hunky-dory. A lot of arch support. They move very well. I tend to find a lot of the sort of pack style boots. I get a lot of foot fatigue in them because they don't really support your foot the right way.
And what do you mean they don't support your foot the right way?
Either the soles will be too flexible, or because of the fact that they usually have like a rubberized bottom, like the lower part of the upper is usually kind of like a rubber type material. I tend to find that it doesn't really support my foot very well, so my foot has to do a lot of extra work to kind of push through snow and going uphill, like I'm digging in with my toes more than I need to, per se.
Got it.
So
Sure.
So I tend to kind of lean a little bit towards like a lighter mountaineering type boot. Now that doesn't mean that everyone should go out and use those for winter hiking, because they're definitely not practical for every situation. A lot of people don't really find mountaineering type boots very comfortable to walk around in, for a good reason. So if you're going to be walking from
super stiff.
Right, they do tend to be a little bit stiff. So if you're going to hike from, say, the Adirondack Lodge out to Avalanche Pass, you definitely don't need that much boot. On the other hand, personal preference, I don't really want a heavily insulated boot for something like that if I'm going to be doing, only a handful of miles in a relatively low risk situation. I don't really want my feet to be boiling hot the whole time. So it's kind of a trade-off for me.
Yeah, boots are just incredibly important, and it's definitely the type of thing you need to figure out what works for you, knowing all the options out there. Find what's the most comfortable and checks the most boxes. You may not find everything that's perfect, but you'll find that something that fits the most is ultimately the best decision.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned you use your Timberland boots in the summertime, which I think is awesome.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they're hiking boots, and Timberland markets them as hiking boots. They just fit my foot and the shape of my foot perfectly. I love them. And I've worn them in the winter as well on, smaller short hikes. They're definitely not insulated. They're waterproof, waterproof-ish, I should say. Water can actually still get in them due to the tongues on them are not waterproof. But ultimately, I've had great experience with them. So let's move on to a conversation that I am super excited to have with you. And when you first messaged me when we were talking about equipment, you mentioned the Tubbs versus the MSR debate. Your words, not mine. I love this idea. Tubbs snowshoes versus MSR snowshoes. There's definitely more options for snowshoes that exist. I see a lot of people wearing Atlas snowshoes as well. And then there's at least like 15 companies that make snowshoes. But for whatever reason, it was funny to me that you worded it the Tubbs versus the MSR debate, because those really are the two companies you see out here in the Adirondacks. I myself am a Tubbs man all day, Tubbs snowshoes. I wear the VRT Flex. They're about $240. They're worth every penny. I've been super excited about them and very happy with them. You can get cheaper options and still pretty much do everything that those do. And before the Tubbs VRT Flex, I had the Tubbs Vertex, which were more I've just had for a long time. And it's definitely more it's not as much for backcountry hiking as it is for snowshoeing, because there's definitely a difference. But the VRT Flex are what I use. I love them. They have the new BOA binding, which I'm super into. And going to the MSR debate, I know the Tubbs Flex, obviously that's their name. They flex and they move with your feet a lot better than from what I've seen from people wearing the MSRs. And my only real knowledge of the MSRs is people who I'm hiking with who are constantly fidgeting with the 18 buckles the bindings have on all the MSR snowshoes. So take me through it, Kenny. Let's have the Tubbs versus MSR debate. I want to set you free right now. Enlighten people.
Sure. I think you nailed a lot of it just there. Most of the Tubbs models, unless you get the ones with the aluminum frame and like the heavy canvas sort of decking material on them, most of them are going to flex really well. And that to me is huge, because that's something else that if your equipment moves freely with you, you have a more natural walking gait. It's going to be more comfortable over miles. And I'm the kind of person too where I know you've mentioned in the past that you said you don't really love wearing your snowshoes. I'm in the same boat, man. It sucks just having to wear the extra equipment. But honestly, if I'm in a situation where I'm on a trail or not on a trail, if I'm digging in even a little bit with my toes or my heels and wearing snowshoes could alleviate that and cause me to be able to shuffle my feet and just expel more effort or less effort. I'm going to the snowshoes all day.
Yeah, it's
Um,
funny you say that because I've actually this winter I've like slowly come over to that idea. Thanks to Jonathan Zaharik, my buddy John, who is kind of the one who pointed that out to me because I'm like I wasn't a snowshoe guy. Last resort, okay, fine, I'll put the shoes on. But yeah, the idea of them making just walking easier and not and you exerting less energy is something I never really thought of snowshoes as. Unlike because you kind of think snowshoes are for the deeper snow areas, but sometimes where it's not deeper, it's actually easier to walk with the snowshoes on. Obviously, your feet are bigger, but I never kind of pegged them as that as doing that sort of thing. So I've actually in this winter I've slowly become okay. I'll put them on a little sooner. Oh, I don't mind them. And at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to leave them on while we hike out because I don't have the strength to take them off right now. And they do kind of help you just walk on not even deep snow terrain. So I've become a fan of them.
yeah, honestly, I think if you're in a couple inches of snow, I mean, not only doing yourself a favor by putting them on your feet because it is easier to kind of shuffle your feet across the surface rather than digging in, picking up, and putting down over and over again. But you're also doing the world a favor. I mean, if you're digging in a little bit with your heels and your toes, you got to think about what's going to happen when that snow hardens up for the people behind you. You're leaving
Sure.
ankle twisters all over the place. But that's a whole nother thing. Getting into the tubs and an MSR thing, you really nailed it. It's the bindings absolutely drove me nuts with the MSRs that I've tried a couple times. And I know that some of their models they're using almost identical systems. The new tub, I believe it's the Alpine Flex or the
The
Alp Flex
ALPs,
model.
yeah.
Yeah. Almost an identical binding system now. But I'm kind of like an old school guy. I actually use a pair of Tubbs Flex TRKs. Not being a super light person, I don't need really, really aggressive crampons in the bottom of my snowshoes for traction. And I like the idea that they still have the single pull binding system on them. So there's one strap, slide my foot in there. Once I get the heel locked in, one strap to pull in the front. And, it really takes all the guesswork out of it.
Sure. Yeah. The Vertex snowshoes that I had, I never had any problems with the binding. It's super fast, super quick to get in. I am a huge fan of this new BOA binding though that Tubbs have on their snowshoes. And I know a lot of people say, yeah, they're great until they break. But I mean, dude, these things, the military uses this BOA technology. So, I mean, I feel like if it's okay for them, it's okay for me out in the backcountry. But yeah, obviously if anything breaks, you're screwed, you're in trouble. But there's enough things that can be done to get you out for the day. Duct tape goes a hell of a long way when you're out there and something breaks. But I'm a fan.
Gear ice, sure.
I'm a fan of them overall.
Yeah, the BOA system itself has come a long way over the last 15 or 20 years or so, however long it's been out for. I think they're up to like BOA Generation 3 or BOA Generation 4 now. I've got a pair of Louis Garneau snowshoes as well that I kind of use for like deeper stuff, a little bit longer snowshoe. They're a 30-inch, a little bit more aggressive crampon in the bottom. Those have a BOA system as well, and I've never once, probably well over 200 miles I've got on those snowshoes. I've never had them pop open on me before. I never had any point of failure on them. And it's not a bad idea to carry a spare BOA string with you if you're going to be using something like that.
Sure.
But I don't think it's really absolutely necessary. Like you said, if you've got a roll of duct tape, you've got a couple of gear ties in your pack, you can figure out how to make it work to get yourself back to your car. At least.
I hear people say all the time, dude, it's so funny. I have this conversation. I tell people I got the tub, I have the VRTs. I really like the BOA binding, and it's just constantly it's the next word until they break. But dude, do you think the people at Tubbs Snowshoes don't know and haven't tested these things? Dude, they're gonna be just fine. Everything's gonna work out. It's gonna work very well. It's going to be just fine. Of course, anything can break out in the backcountry. We know that. We understand. But, I mean, and there's another another disclaimer we should say. Everything works, and everything is kind of the eye of the beholder when it comes to what's going to work for equipment-wise. These outdoors companies, man, they put the time in, they put the effort in, they know what they're doing. Everything will work. Everything will work. It just kind of depends on your pros and cons list and what you want to be using. But obviously some things are better than others. But overall, snowshoes are going to do what snowshoes are going to do because they're tested. They're going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to any type of gear at all, I don't care if it's snowshoes or any other piece of equipment, a new pack or a tent or whatever. If you're really torn, like you said, if you're really torn between 2 or 3 different things, if you have the means to do it, just order all of them and returns the one that don't work for you.
Yep.
So if I'm looking at a new pair of snowshoes right now, I'm probably going to order the new MSR, like the Evos, the Lightning Ascents, one or possibly both of them, and compare them to the Tubbs Alps and take them out for a spin in my backyard, see how they do, fiddle with the binding systems with a couple different pairs of footwear, see how comfortable they are. And whichever ones don't work for me, they can go back. That's fine. But at least I'll have a sense of what I'm using before I get out in the backcountry. And that's kind of to that same point. Please make sure you check your equipment before you go out in the backcountry. Don't be the guy who's like unwrapping the Amazon package in the lodge parking lot at the trailhead.
In his car at the parking lot, totally.
Right, and has no idea how to use the gear he's about to go out and use for the first time. And, his life's going to depend on it for the very first time. No concept whether or not it's going to work.
Sure.
So
if you get new snowshoes and you need to test them out, just come to my house in Lake Placid. The snowplow pile in my driveway is a perfect place to test out snowshoes. It's basically the size of Cobble Hill. That's where I tested my snowshoes out when I got them.
Nice.
So with that said, I am a Tubbs man. I go Tubbs all day, and I highly recommend them. But again, anything is going to work. But I personally enjoy the Tubbs VRT Flex snowshoes. All right, let's call it for that debate. Now, base layer options. There's obviously lots of different things you can do for a base layer when you're out hiking in the wintertime. And in the summertime, it's not a bad idea to keep a base layer in your backpack. They take up next to no space. They weigh nothing. And if you do get caught out there overnight, it will get cold, especially when you're up in elevation. It's nice to have those in your backpack all year long. But there's lightweight base layer options. There's midweight. There's heavyweight. What do you tend to go with? What do you like to wear in the wintertime?
Keeping up with the theme of starting from the bottom and working your way up. The base layer pants I go with are really going to depend on what I'm using for outerwear that day.
Sure. And the temperatures.
And the temperatures. So for the most part, I almost always hike if it's, during the snowy season with a pair of soft shell pants. I really don't like hard shell pants at all. They make me sweat more. They don't breathe as well. And just to be honest, the swishing noise just absolutely drives me nuts. So with that in mind, the base layer is going to be the next most important thing. And I either go lightweight, midweight, or heavyweight. I don't spend the money on the really expensive Smart Wool or Patagonia base weight layers. I look for coupons. I go get Under Armour or Adidas or Nike Dry Fit, some type of compression legging. You can find them that'll work for basically any season. I'm actually a really big fan of the Under Armour Cold Gear stuff.
Sure, I have those as well.
They're really durable. They last a long time. They do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're also one of the only non-outdoor specific companies out there that makes cold weather compression leggings that actually have a pee hole in them. So that makes things a lot easier on the trail.
Oh man, does it ever? Yeah, we'll move on to different pants options here. As we move up the body here, I like to start with a base layer underneath. This is for winter hiking. Summer is the same except without the base layer. I usually tend to go with a lightweight base layer, even if I'm hiking in. I know it's going to be 0 degrees at the parking lot, so therefore I know it's going to be super cold because for whatever reason my legs are good. I I don't want to sweat. It keeps me from sweating, and I've never felt cold in my as far as my legs go. So I go base